Ohio there, this is Kermit the Frog.
I'm Captain Kirk.
Fascinating.
I'm a doctor, not a mechanic.
Thank you, love you. Mwah.
Most illogical.
Aye, sir.
Well, that was different. Yep, lousy, but different.
Places, please, and here we go.
Welcome, ladies, gentlemen, bears, Klingons, and things to episode 122 of the MuppeTrek Podcast. I'm Jarman.
And I'm Steve. We're here to compare, contrast, and confer about two of our favorite franchises. And Jarman, what are those?
Those are, of course, the Muppets and Star Trek. And we do one-to-one reviews, the Muppet Show and Star Trek The Next Generation.
And this week we have a very special Muppet Show with a very special guest star, Roger Moore. And this is the final episode.
That's right.
Of the Muppet Show. What Next Generation episode are we checking out?
Heart of Glory. That's right. And at the end of the Muppet thing, stay tuned because we'll be doing our top three and bottom three of this season, and then seeing if our final three and final bottom three will be changing at all of the whole series.
Then we'll have a recommend of the entire Muppet Show, which is kind of crazy.
That's crazy. Oh my goodness. But Steve, before we get there, yes, tell us about Roger Moore. Who is this guy?
Well, he's a distinguished English actor, and that's Sir Roger Moore. He was knighted in, I think, 2003 by Queen Elizabeth. Well, he played James Bond in 7 feature films, and in 1991, he became appointed as a UNICEF Goodwill Ambassador. But what does our audience know him from? Well, he has 100 IMDb credits to his name.
Wow.
But most of us, he is simply Bond, James Bond. Or one of them. One of the Bond James Bonds.
The worst James Bond, in my opinion, but that's just me.
Even worse than Bruce Lazenby or whatever those names.
Lazenby was just fine.
Lazenby, he did it one time.
He did that. One was enough for him, and he knew when to leave, or they kicked him out. Either way, he was good enough for what he was for.
And Roger Moore. The last time we cast an Australian. But what's he up to? Roger Moore up to this week on the Muppet Show? Well, on stage, Kermit introduces Roger Moore, but first, a Viking number. We find ourselves in a quaint hamlet, which is brutally pillaged by pig Vikings who ransack the town to the tune of "In the Navy." Kermit then takes the stage and is pied from off stage. He then introduces Roger Moore in a up-class high-rise, where Piggy attempts to seduce him by singing a song called "A Slow Boat to China," but he has a date and he isn't even a frog. Piggy can't take the hint, and it turns out that his hot date is Annie Sue, the other lady pig, which only further enrages Miss Piggy. New Zealand takes the stage, which is with his singing fish. They perform "You Light Up My Life" as a hook drags him off stage. Following this, we get Veterinarian's Hospital, where a Viking pig is on the table. This devolves mostly into Viking and pillaging jokes. In front of the stage, we get Nigel, the band leader, and the Muppet Show band. They perform a rendition of "How High the Moon." It's a nice little ditty, and the Muppet band gets a little highlight, which doesn't happen that often. Next up is Bear on Patrol, where Captain Link has a new toupee for some reason, and a traveling handcuff salesman tricks them into handcuffing themselves to each other, and then he robs them blind. We then get a Muppet Sport with Louis Kazagger. He's covering cross-country billiard tournament where cue-wielding men in dapper suits hit balls across the rolling landscapes, and one attacks a deer. Following this is the Muppet News Flash. A spy ring is creating fake news, and in related news, a fish was elected king. A fish then shows up and assaults the newsman terribly. Kermit introduces Roger Moore one last time, joined by a bevy of cute and cuddly animals as he sings "Talk to the Animals." He wanders a circus talking to the various taxonomy. One of the dogs clues him in that there are spies in their midst, and Roger springs into action, fighting the spies, chopping and blasting them with a laser pistol for some reason, and saving the number. Backstage, there isn't a ton of plot to speak of. The biggest thing is that Kermit wants to hire spies for the closing number. So he hires spies thinking they're performers, but they're actual spies who mean to do harm to 007 Roger Moore. And they are the ones in the final number. Kermit thanks Roger one final time. Roger is done with cute animals and only wants the grotesque and weird Muppets. And that is what we call the Muppet Show. So, Jarman, what did you think of this week's episode of the Muppet Show with Roger Moore?
I will say, if we had Steven describing every episode in that way, it would make them all a lot more exciting, because I thought this was quite a dud, in my opinion.
Yeah.
You actually made it sound really good. But that's just a matter of that. It was, I have a big bone to pick with hosts who just don't stretch themselves in any way, shape, or form. And I'm sure he's a talented actor, but we didn't see any of it. We just saw him being boring gentleman the whole time and not doing anything exciting. Didn't really, and he was, even this one song that he did, he said, I'm going to sing a song. He just sung it like he was the guy from My Fair Lady or whatever, not actually singing.
Right. Rex Harrison.
Rex Harrison.
Is who you're talking about, who like revolutionized talk singing.
Exactly. And then for me, it's like, yeah, great. We had the orchestra doing like their own little number, but it wasn't, they just played a song. There was nothing special or different about it. They just played a whole song. I was like, oh, so they needed to fill time. Okay, gotcha. And then, I don't know, like the Bear Patrol scene was fine. The veterinary hospital scene was fine. So those kind of were okay. Cross-country billiards was a fun idea. But with this dull host, it just kind of overall was a bad episode for me. What about you?
Before we go on, I just got to say, I remember in high school, we did a big Lerner and Lowe medley, which included My Fair Lady. And when we got to any of the guys' songs, none of us knew the tune to the actual song because Rex Harrison didn't sing any tune.
Exactly.
And I remember our course teacher couldn't figure out why we didn't know the song already. And it was because he just spoke and none of us knew what the actual notes we were supposed to sing were for anything.
And apparently he did it on Broadway too. But I just read this recently and they didn't want him for the movie because they thought he'd be too old for the thing. But then they offered it to other people and they're just like, no, just have Rex Harrison do it. And it's just, they just sung everything.
Yeah. So this week, I don't know. So here's the thing. In the Navy was maybe one of the most impressive musical numbers we've seen from the entire Muppet Show.
That was pretty good.
It's hard to write that down. You get other good things like New Zealand Singing Fish, and the regulars like Veterinarian's Hospital, Muppet News Flash, and a Muppet Sports. I think the Muppet side of this episode is incredibly strong. It is the weak British tea on the other side of the episode.
Literally.
Sorry to our UK listeners. That really brought it down. I agree. Roger Moore didn't stretch. He wasn't interesting. Even his talk singing was underwhelming.
It's like he was bored and we were bored with him. And I actually didn't even like the New Zealand number because it's even in the past when he does that singing things with the fish, like they actually are on key. But in this one, like they were so off key that it wasn't even like, I got why she pulled him off stage because I was just like, this isn't even like, they're not even playing the song. So I don't know. It was just like, and then the whole filler thing with the orchestra.
I thought that was nice.
It was nice, I guess. I don't know. But Viking number was very strong. There's no arguing against
Viking
that.
number was incredibly strong.
Totally agree.
And I said, I liked the Muppet News Flash. I liked the Muppet Sports, which we've only gotten 5 or 6 times in the entire Muppet Show, really.
That's true.
Realistically. And the Veterinarian's Hospital. So I've got mixed feelings on this episode, but I agree. It can't end up anywhere near the top because Roger Moore was just so underwhelming.
Hello, I'm on a show. Great.
And honestly, this reminds me of earlier episodes, like season 2, season 3 episodes, where they introduced the backstage plot just too late. There being spies around was genius, but they came in 15 minutes into the episode. And so they couldn't do anything with them. But if the spies had been there the whole time trying to take out Roger Moore as he's doing various sketches, interrupting backstage, on stage, it could have been brilliant.
I agree. That's a great idea.
And they dropped it so hard. So I was actually very interested to see, because I looked at the production order of these episodes, and this is not the last one they recorded, because this doesn't feel like a last episode.
Yeah.
Because as far as I know, the Muppet Show was not canceled. Jim just was kind of done. Like he was just kind of over it. And so the real last one is the Gene Kelly episode. So I plan to go back and watch the Gene Kelly episode to see if it feels like a final episode.
And that was the first episode of this season for the lineup.
It was the last one produced.
Weird.
Yeah. So I'm going to rewatch because, as I said, this was not the last produced episode, and it doesn't feel that way.
Whereas nowadays, like they starting to film episodes like just a few months before they come out. So like that would never happen these days where like the last episode film is the first episode that airs. That's crazy.
Yeah. Post-production is much shorter now than it used to be.
Oh yeah. Very true.
Yeah, not anywhere near the top. That being said, I didn't hate it. There was enough good Muppet stuff to keep it a little bit afloat for me.
Fair.
Well, this week's music, In the Navy from the Village People. So after the success of the YMCA, the U.S. Navy contacted the Village People to do this song, and the Village People said, we'll do it, but we want to use your facilities for the music video. And a month later, they were down on like the USS San Diego filming In the Navy with the Navy because the Navy was so excited.
And how ironic that a time like that where they're not very open to gay people, they have like these 4 gay guys just like, hey, we're on the boat.
We want you as a new recruit. On a Slow Boat to China by Frank Lesser. It has been covered by lots and lots of folks, including Bing Crosby and Frank Sinatra, as well as fellow Muppet Show guests Ella Fitzgerald and Liza Minnelli. You Lit Up My Life, made famous by Debbie Boone, but it was first recorded by an artist named Casey Sissick. I think that's how you say it. Joseph Brooks, the writer, had Sissick record the original version of it. It supposedly promised her some big role in a future movie of his, made it pass at her, and when she declined him, he just dodged her and wouldn't pay her.
Oh, God, that's terrible.
And he dodged her for a year. In the meantime, he got Debbie Boone to record a new version, and that's the one that got famous. So that's just what a jag. How High the Moon by Lewis and Hamilton also performed in the Dudley Moore episode. It's from the Broadway review 2 for the Show, which turns out was part of a 3-part Broadway review series called 1 for the Money, 2 for the Show, and 3 to Make Ready. Pretty damn clever. Talk to the Animals by Leslie Bricusse. I think I got that. Written for the 1967 movie Dr. Dolittle, starring Rex Harrison. Apparently, most people working on the movie hated the song and thought it was really lame. And really were not sure about it, but it ended up being the signature song from the movie. So, but at the time, everyone was like, man, why are we doing this musical number?
I remember that number. It's a good number.
That's right. So, Jarman, what did you think was the best Muppeteering moment here on the final episode of The Muppet Show?
I think we have to agree it's a Viking number.
Yeah, I know that's a lot. It's hard to, because it was such a big number with so many components to say it's like the best Muppeteering, but it was really just crazy.
Yeah, there was so much going on, and also the sense of scale. It felt like it was actually out in this at sea. It kind of felt like it was really big, so it was like really impressive.
Yeah.
They must put on a soundstage.
Oh yeah, and like they make custom sets for most of this stuff, but this was on a different production level. I felt like
it was big. They had to go all out to make up for this host. So
yeah, they're like, quick, make the set bigger, bigger than Roger Moore's boorishness.
distract.
But I totally agree. In the Navy, what was the best?
Oh yeah, good. It was very good.
All right. So speaking of the best and the worst, we have come to the end of the 5th season of the Muppet Show and the end of the Muppet Show series, which is crazy to say.
After 5 years, I'm almost on doing the show.
Yeah. Well, because the original series, we knew it was short. So we're like, we're not going to be doing this that long. But the Muppet Show, we're like, we got plenty of the Muppet Show. And now we're at the end.
Oh, crap.
Oh, crap. All right. So do you want to start with top 3 or bottom 3 from this season?
I think top 3, and we can alternate.
Okay. My first entry for the top 3 is Gladys Knight.
Okay.
Great musical numbers, including A Night and Day with the Mummies, Friendship Train, God Bless the Child, that sweet moment with her and Rolf, Heard It Through the Grapevine at the end. And you add to that the great backstage plot of the weather coming in and the roof caving in and the workers.
That was really good.
And the snow coming in at the end and like ruining the last number. I think it's one of the funniest. Oh, and then you get the knife throwing guy in the fog throwing knives at Fozzie as he screams, which is arguably one of the best, funniest bits in all of the Muppet Show. And it's just a well-balanced episode with backstage plot, on stage, great interactive guest, great Muppet moments, and great performances.
That almost made my list.
Gladys Knight is high towards the top of season 5.
Well, one of my first ones is the Brooke Shields episode, which was not on Disney Plus because of rights issues. Nothing bad that happened that episode, just rights issues. They can't get the music, that kind of thing, or maybe the story. I don't know what the deal is.
Yeah.
But Brooke Shields was amazing and innocent as she was so young, and she played a wonderful Alice from Alice in Wonderland. And for me, it felt just like a total self-contained episode. Like it was like a mini Muppets movie of just this Alice in Wonderland story folding out all the sets they had to make just for that. All the characters were involved with different characters, and the really cool, I think it was it a caterpillar? What was it? A dragon or something? The Jabberwocky. That's right. So yeah, overall, I was really impressed by that. It was just really entertaining and so different than everything we had seen on the Muppet Show in that regard. And so if you can find it, folks, I think on YouTube, check it out. It's a lot of fun. That was one of my favorites.
I'm going to double up because this is also my top 3.
There you go.
I totally agree. Great. The Alice in Wonderland was just a great backdrop for an episode. I love that even that there was a backstage plot of Fozzie not knowing what Alice in Wonderland was and instead pursuing Wizard of Oz.
That's right.
I love that we got to see the characters we love just transition to Alice in Wonderland. Great sketches like the Jabberwock. And then even things like integrating Muppet Labs where Dr. Bunsen Honeydew is the one trying to figure out how to grow and shrink her.
Yeah, that's right. It makes sense with the Muppets.
And it all ends with we're off to see the wizard, which is just the most absurd part.
That might be the rights issue.
But yeah, just making things Muppety, well themed. So that's top 3 for me too.
Nice. I've got one shared. My second one then will be Glenda Jackson. Okay. I was really impressed by her. Like I'd never heard of her, but we found out she's really big in the UK, or she was for a long time. I think she was in office for a while in the Parliament. But she was just multi-talented, totally committed to every scene, like in the best way possible. The whole episode just ran by. That whole pirate scene at the end was really great, and she was just so much fun to watch. So that definitely made my top 3.
Yeah, you're right. She was super high energy. She did make like kind of an honorable mention for me. The pirate thing, you were right, was great and similar to the Alice in Wonderland. Took over parts of the episode and really spanned well. So yeah, I agree. She didn't make my top 3, but I can't say anything bad about her either.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so my third and final one is Carol Burnett.
Very nice.
Great backstage plot of them canceling the show and making it a dance competition. Carol's escalating frustration with the fact that she can't be on the show. She showed up. We even get a Pigs in Space, and then it ends with Carol in an asparagus costume. Tears. I think it's really the best example of a backstage plot just fully taking over the show.
Oh yeah.
Fully taking over the show, maybe since the Steve Martin episode where it was just they're auditioning people.
Oh, that's right.
And that is the show. And Carol Burnett just brings it, interacts well with the Muppets, takes them seriously.
She's kind of a Muppet herself a little bit.
In many ways,
it worked out. That was on my short list too. But my third one is more unusual for me because it was more of a slower episode, but I really enjoyed it. It just was Mac Davis. I think he just really fit as a Muppet person telling stories, and like they got to incorporate all their country western kind of characters and stuff into that. And it just was, and then the Beaker clones were all throughout the entire episode. They took over. The
Beaker clones were really, really good. And the Mac Davis episode had another opening, another show, which is, I think, one of the best musical numbers from the entire show.
There you go. But I feel like he was just like, he seemed like he was just totally comfortable hanging out with those Muppets and telling some stories, and the songs he sang worked so perfectly. So that just kind of like fit right in for me. Yep. And awesome mention, just a reminder, at the end where they replaced the entire Muppet band with Beakers and redid the end credits, including Statler and Waldorf being replaced by Beakers. It was like a scene from The Birds, and I love it. I love it. It was really great.
So that was towards the top for me too, but didn't quite make top 3. I totally agree.
All good ones here. There was a lot of great ones in this season. There was harder actually for me to find all the stinkers. So we'll get into that now.
So luckily this time through, I finally got smart and I made some special notes on ones that I thought were real stinkers so I could find them more easily.
Nice.
So it really paid off. So speaking of stinkers, let's talk about our bottom 3 for season 5.
Yes.
I'm going to go first. I've got to say James Coburn.
Oh, okay.
The episode flew by, but like really not in a good way. There was no through plot. There were not enough standard Muppet Show sketches, and they had some major pacing issues because the 2/3 of the episode was just 2 really long music sketches.
Yes, that's true. I remember that.
And then the Roaring 20 Flappers thing, and then the weird cowboy tribute to Japan at the end that turns extremely racially insensitive.
That was really weird.
So between all those factors, James Coburn ends up at the bottom of the list.
It didn't end at the bottom for me because I think I liked James Coburn and how he did his stuff, but you're right. I didn't enjoy the episode, but it wasn't a total stinker for me because I think he did try and he did a pretty good job, but I can see where you're going with that.
Yeah.
My first one is Jean-Pierre Rampal, the flautist. Nothing against him. I don't think he's a bad guy. I think he was trying, but I think it was just an overall bad choice of a host for this show because that's all he can do is play the flute, and he can't act. He didn't interact with the Muppets very well. It just was really slow for me. I was just like, this is just not a good host to have on the show.
Yeah. My second one is also Jean-Pierre Rampal. You're right. Extremely limited. He didn't do any characters, really lackluster sketches. And even though there was a crazy abundance of Muppet Show standards, it wasn't enough to bail out such a lame and limited host.
Yeah. No fault to Jean-Pierre Rampal. He's great at the flute. Good for him.
Yeah.
My second one then is going to be surprisingly Paul Simon. So
really,
yes, the episode
does surprise me. In fact,
overall episode maybe not that terrible, and there's been much worse episodes. You can already tell he's not going to be on my bottom 3 for the whole show. But
right.
he was so. I think because he was so famous and his songs are so good, but he sang slower songs. It wasn't as interesting to watch. He just didn't seem like he was all that into it to me. And it just was kind of low energy and. I just think the rest of the episode couldn't save it for me.
See, I think that I'm going to disagree on this one specifically because you say like he's low energy, but like that's kind of Paul Simon's shtick. Is he always played straight man, low energy? Think about like the music video for "Call Me Al." You know?
You call me, and he falls asleep.
But the one part of the episode that I will not bend on is that it's been a long day. His backstage musical number is like one of my favorite backstage musical numbers. I'm a sucker for backstage musical numbers in the Muppet Show. And it's got your favorite thing where it starts out as a one-on-one and then randomly Muppets just wander in.
Love it.
Love it. It features that heavily.
That might have been part of it too.
So my final one, because we both agree on Jean-Pierre Rampal, is Shirley Bassey. Despite some good numbers and like a decent backstage plot, that was the gold heist episode.
Oh yeah.
It just wasn't pushed far enough. And I went and re-listened to my critique of the episode and I referred to it as it's the okay soup of episodes. And it was the okay soup of episodes. There were stale and stiffed moments. It was packed with too much music to like get anything else in there. And I even at the time speculated that it would probably end up bottom 3.
There you go. And it did.
At the time of review. Yeah. And it did. So James Coburn, Jean-Pierre Rampal, and Shirley Bassey.
My third one is going to be the final episode, Roger Moore.
Wow.
I just felt he just dragged that whole thing down with him. And it just was, there's time fillers in it. And it just, for me, the Viking number couldn't save it. He just was awful. And he should be disappointed in himself.
Fair. That's fair. So now that we are at not only the end of the season, but the end of the series, we need to look at our top 3 and bottom 3 series lists and come to a decision.
And we'll recap what we already have so far.
Yeah. My top 3. Actually, let's start with bottom 3 for the big list. So bottom 3, Spike Milligan, who was just too British to find funny. Doug Henning, who did nothing but magician shtick in an otherwise unremarkable episode. And then Rich Little, who's an impressionist who's not that good at impressions.
Yeah, exactly. I remember that. Oh, yeah.
So those are my bottom three as it stood going into this decision.
And mine was Bob Hope, who seemed like he'd rather be anywhere else the entire episode. And they had to put him on the screen a lot, and he didn't want to be there. And then we had Jonathan Winters, who is a comedian who just had really shticky or like schlocky jokes from like the 1920s were terrible.
And some racially insensitive stuff in there, as I remember.
A lot of that too. And then also Rich Little, because of the same reason. Terrible impressionist for a whole episode.
So all of those people left bad tastes in our mouth. Did anyone from this season taste worse?
So my only replacement that I have for my bottom three, you might not be happy about it, but it's replacing Jonathan Winters, because I think even though his jokes were terrible and racially insensitive, it seemed like I went back and looked and he was trying. He was actually there trying to do a good job.
Right.
Unlike Rich Little, who was barely going through his impressions, Bob Hope, who didn't give a shit. So I'm replacing Jonathan Winters with Roger Moore.
Wow, Roger Moore. The last episode we watched ends up in the bottom three.
Exactly.
You heard it here, people. You heard it here.
Yep.
So all three of mine hold their spots.
Nice.
There were some less than stellar things this season, but there was nothing outright like offensive to me as a fan.
That's fair.
This season compared to prior ones.
Yeah.
With Spike Milligan and Doug Henning and Rich Little were just so bad. So I think that means that we can declare that Rich Little is
the worst
episode of the entire Muppet Show.
Don't watch it. He's not worth it.
You did it, Rich Little. Canada, you should be ashamed.
He's Canadian. Oh,
yes. I'm so sorry, Sean Vanderlip. Congratulations again on getting married.
Yes, congrats. But not to Rich Little.
But not to Rich Little, a piece of shit. All right. Well, so just to remind, my bottom three for the entire series: Spike Milligan, Doug Henning, and Rich Little. And Jeremy, what are yours again?
Is Bob Hope, Rich Little, and Roger Moore.
Wow. All right. Now let's move on to Better Waters. Let's talk about the top three.
Yes.
My top three series to date: Harry Belafonte. Exceptional host, great music making, great rapport with the Muppets. You get to see him perform Deo on television for the first time. Maybe I remember I kind of found that might not be 100% true. Great funny moments. The song that he wrote for the show, closing them out with the African masks and all that, just makes for a great overall episode. Liza Minnelli, that was the murder mystery, like Guy Noir episode that maybe is the only one to surpass the Alice in Wonderland episode.
Yeah, for story.
In a story and a theme taking over the show. And then Zero Mostel, who was just such a Muppet himself, and despite being like kind of old and tired, really gave it his all and interacted and played hard with the Muppets to the point where I think we basically said he was one.
That was a great episode.
Well, okay, what about you? What's your top three?
My top three were Peter Ustinov was still on the list.
Another Muppet.
Yeah, he was a complete Muppet. Early on, he got the memo. He knew what the hell was going on, and he was just like that whole episode. He was incorporated as different characters the whole damn time. Like, that is a host I want to see on this show. My other one, Liza Minnelli, as well. She was just, that whole episode was just so well done with her, and that role was perfect. And then also Gilda Radner was on my top three because she also very much is a Muppet, and she fit in so well with her characters as a Muppet. So
that super glue sketch where she's just slowly sticking.
Yeah, and at the end of the episode, everything was stuck to everything. It was hilarious.
It's just brilliant.
Yeah.
Okay, so now the question is: any of the good episodes from this season, do they displace any of your previous top three?
So one was displaced for me, only because Gilda was great, but I didn't want to leave two people on there that were just because they were fully Muppets themselves on the list, even though Gilda was fantastic. So just for sheer entertainment value, I feel like I was watching an action comedy movie. I'm putting Glenda Jackson in there. She makes my top three of the whole season series.
Wow, that's impressive. I'm not going to say it'd be controversial, but I'm not sure I've ever seen her on a top list before.
Yeah, just because I think I've never seen her. She blew me out of the water. She's so charismatic. And
yeah,
I'm also, my wife will contest that I have just a thing for like older, intelligent and pretty women like Kate Blanchett, and she fits in that category for me, like Jonah Jackson. And so she was just really, it was so entertaining. It was swashbuckling. It was fun. It was just like an overall fun thing.
You heard it here, folks. German, like sharp, handsome women.
Sharp, handsome women. You're damn right. What about you? Anything change out of your list?
Yeah. So Zero Mostel, as good as he was, I had to replace him with Gladys Knight at the end of the day. Not only does that episode specifically hold a nostalgia note for me, which I'm willing to admit, but even looking at it now later, it has sort of all the best parts of what a Muppet Show episode should be.
Mm-hmm.
Good engaging host, good standard like sketches, great backstage plot extending in that affects the sketch. That sweet moment, God bless the child, with her and Rolf, and their banter at the beginning is still one of my favorite things, and maybe my favorite banter ever in the Muppet Show. So because of that, Gladys Knight is going to take Zero Mostel's place.
So your final three are going to be
Harry Belafonte, Liza Minnelli, and Gladys Knight.
And I'm Peter Ustinov, Liza Minnelli, and Glenda Jackson.
Bam.
So that means
Liza Minnelli is the best episode of the Muppet Show.
There we go.
It may not be my favorite. I'm willing to say like the Harry Belafonte is probably still my absolute favorite. But if I were to try to recommend an episode of the Muppet Show, it would probably be the Liza Minnelli episode.
There you go.
Yeah.
So I like that we both have one man and two women on our best of, and three old white men at our worst episodes.
It's the oldest, worst white guys that they can find.
Well, thank you so much, Muppet Show, for giving us everything you did. And we'll be talking about what we're doing next later on. But yeah,
that's right. We're not done yet, folks. But before that, Jarman, what happened on this week's episode of Star Trek The Next Generation?
All right. So this time around, we have Heart of Glory. So the Enterprise has to enter the Romulan neutral zone to investigate the distress call of a Talarian freighter. But when the away team beams over, they find only 3 Klingons on board instead. And one of the Klingons is wounded, so they all go back to the Enterprise right before the freighter blows up from damage that looked like it received during some sort of battle. And the Klingon captain that's there with those Klingons, named Chorus, says that they were passengers on the Talarian ship when these Ferengi attacked. So they took over the freighter and destroyed the Ferengi, and the Talarians all left for safety. The Klingons are surprised to meet Lieutenant Worf, who appears to be a Klingon in Starfleet, which they're surprised by. So they have dinner with Worf, and they start to bond and talk about Klingon shit. And they finally admit to him that their story was a lie and that they really were on the run from the Klingon Empire because they hate this peace with the Federation. They want to go do battles because it's in their blood to be a Klingon and do battle. So they had destroyed a Klingon vessel that was trying to arrest them. But then their third injured Klingon dies in sickbay, and they reveal to everyone their Klingon death ritual with Worf, where they stare into the Klingon's eyes as he dies and then roar into the air as he takes his last breath to warn the afterlife that a Klingon warrior is about to join them. And then a Klingon battlecruiser arrives to come find out what happened to the ship that was going to arrest Chorus and his men. And they talk with Picard and tell him that Chorus and his men are fugitives and to hand them over immediately. And Picard must comply due to politics with the Federation, so he sends his security to arrest the Klingons, and they do, and they put them in the brig. And Worf tries to barter with the captain of the battlecruiser, saying that these fugitives are just doing what's in their Klingon heritage and what they want to do, which is to battle. So once they're arrested, can he not kill them and give them a dishonorable death, but let them go to some planet to battle it out until they die? And the captain sympathizes, but says they have to be executed. It's the law. And then the remaining 2 Klingons escape their cell, and they kill one of the crew members of the Enterprise. But one of the Klingons dies in the process, but the Captain Chorus escapes out to the Enterprise. And he's trying to take the battle bridge away from the saucer section of the Enterprise so he can go battling across the universe. But Worf tracks him down, and they battle, and he kills him in battle so that he has an honorable death. And he tells the captain of the battlecruiser what happened. And the battlecruiser captain's like, well, you should come on our ship next to when your tour of duty's over. And Worf is just like, oh, thank you, I'll consider it. And then he tells the rest of the crew once he's gone, he's like, no, I was just being polite. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to stay here.
Yeah, I just like that the Worf was like, I was just fucking around.
I would never do that. So, Steve, what do you think of this episode?
Okay, so some things I liked. I liked that the intro where they beam over Geordi and Riker and Data, and we get to see what Geordi sees.
Oh, yeah, I didn't mention that. We actually have a feed into Geordi's visor for this episode for the first time.
That was really cool. And to hear how he interprets it and has to extrapolate data and stuff, that was interesting. I like that the dangerous derelict ship failing life support, that Jean-Luc Picard was not the first one to go over for once. Like an incredibly dangerous situation. We should probably not send the captain.
Yes.
I did like the ambiance and the mood that they created while they were on the derelict ship. It was claustrophobic feeling, and
Creepy.
I really enjoyed that. A good reveal with the Klingons. And I like that. So a lot of times when they bring on like guest aliens, they act suspicious as hell. And the question is like, why are they acting suspicious in hell? That's how I liked that it was okay for the Klingons to be suspicious. So it didn't make it weird that they were up to extra no good.
Right, because you already knew it was
like they were
Klingons.
already suspicious of the Klingons.
Yeah, exactly.
As opposed to it's like, here are these aliens we're supposed to trust. They're up to something. We did get some good like lore-based Klingon kind of information, a little bit more about how they function and their death rights and that kind of stuff. And I did enjoy the Klingons putting together parts for their blaster and their prison cell.
Yeah, that was
the
pretty
idea
cool.
They're resourceful, but my question is, how many of those do you think came from the butt? I know they didn't show it, but some parts of that gun definitely came from a butt.
A Klingon warrior always keeps some extra gun up his butt.
And then this was one of the most, I'll say, brutal and direct murderers we've ever seen on the show.
Yes, and they kind of gloss over it.
Well, you said one. They may have killed two guys.
That's true.
They literally, the first guy goes in for some reason, door opens, he just walks in and gets shot. They go out. They take his gun, they go out, and the second guy shoots the one guy. He gets shot. When they come, they only address the fact that second guy has been killed. They don't even recognize that the other guy is dead or down or injured. So I don't think they found his body yet at that point.
Maybe not.
So that was brutal. I was like, oh my God, they're just dead. All right. The only death in Star Trek I can think of more brutal was when Abraham Lincoln got speared in the back to death. In the Savage Curtain of the original series. That's the only more brutal death I can think of.
Abraham Lincoln always gets the raw deal, I tell you what.
And then I did like the ending, the sort of poetic ending of Worf going to give him a good Klingon death, sort of completing his own internal struggle of his humanity versus his Klingongitude. I wasn't sure what to use.
Klingoniness.
Klinglong. So I just thought that was nice. It was nice and poetic and well written and well executed. Some dislikes. Tasha Yar, God, just put her out of her misery, guys. What are you doing with Denise Crosby? This episode, she got 2 lines.
Ooh. And one of them wasn't hitting on the captain, so that's good.
Yeah. And then for a ship that you know is dangerous, has dangerous levels of gas and questionable life support, why don't you just send over Data?
Right.
The only crew member that doesn't need life support and is arguably better and more capable than everyone else you sent combined.
Or wear spacesuits, maybe.
It felt... For an episode that really hinged on Worf connecting with that sort of part of himself that's missing, it felt like his scenes with the other Klingons really fell flat. And the reason is that there wasn't enough justification to show why he would be torn. At one point, they even have to say it out loud. I think Picard says, he must be torn. These are his people. And I'm like, are they though? Worf was raised by humans. He would more clearly identify with the somewhat peaceful side of the Klingon Empire than these rebels.
Well, see, I disagree because that whole scene where the captain is talking, the Captain Chorus guy is saying, I bet when you were younger, you had that hunger. and everyone dismissed you or thought you were crazy because you always wanted to go out there and hunt, and they judged you for it. And it's like showing Worf like thinking
the dinner
about it.
Scene. Yeah,
and he's like saying, so you see, like even though he was brought up by humans, there was this part of him he could never express, and now it's finally he's being embraced by these two Klingons as a brother, and it's like that's got to be kind of meaningful, I guess. Those scenes, that dinner scene specifically, or maybe they're having drinks, I don't know, when they're sitting and putting something in their mouth. That scene just didn't hit for me. And so it didn't deliver that for me. Maybe because I didn't connect with that scene, that like one real pivotal scene. It might be some kind of bias I have from knowing all of Worf's arc over the many series. So maybe that kind of made more sense. But yeah, that's fair. And then why are security people in Starfleet continue to be the most inept individuals? Like stormtroopers.
I am realizing that people in yellow shirts couldn't get into other departments. That is what I am coming to recognize here. The guy's guarding two dangerous criminals. The force field drops. He announces it and then immediately leaves cover.
Yeah. Well, he
doesn't peek around the corner, doesn't put his phaser forward, just immediately walks out chest forward.
Shoot me
into a cell with two dangerous convicts. Even if this wasn't Star Trek and this was just a prison show, that would still be friggin' stupid.
The only justification I gave was like, well, at least he wouldn't think they have a gun. So that, right. But that you're right. You would just run in. You'd kind of like look around and see what the hell's going on.
Or you station up outside the door where they have to come through if they want to leave the room. That's also true.
Yes, that did make a lot of sense. What I like about, I was going to say, in regards to that is the new Trek stuff. I really like even stuff that's set during this time period or like even original series time period. They really put an emphasis on that even if you're like a scientist in Starfleet, you have really good combat training. So like everyone in Starfleet, it's supposed to be like, and they show how good that is in the newer shows where it's like even the basic scientists can probably kick your ass because they went through really good Starfleet training. But yeah, and here it's like they're just idiots and run into things like, so yeah, it doesn't work out.
And then the rest of my issues with this were sort of surrounding the ending, for me not connecting that scene. Like that just not having the impact because like in the very short time, like the 20 hours they have known each other, and Worf never really fully siding with him. Why would Chorus think that Worf would possibly side with him to steal part of the ship and go off marauding and murdering?
Really hoped, I guess. I don't know.
I guess. That and then the dialogue between Worf and Chorus at the end when he's pointing the blaster at the warp core or the dilithium thing just devolved. The dialogue just went south entirely. It just developed into them saying like platitudes and sayings you would see on posters mixed with like a little bit of Shakespeare. It got real stiff and stunted in that last scene.
See what I would have hoped for in that last scene would that Chorus would recognize what Worf was doing, giving him an honorable death, and kind of like see that recognition in his eyes and him go like, yeah, let's battle, like that would have been kind of cool. But I was waiting for that moment because that would be very Klingon of him. But instead he got all pissed off and I was like, nah, it doesn't really work. Like, no, he would have been like, oh, he's giving me an honorable death. Cool. I'm down for this, So the last scene kind of didn't do it for me either. But I think I got really annoyed watching Klingons over the years because you'll get so much Klingon shit going forward, and people love it. They love it to death. They can't get enough of it. But I actually did kind of like seeing this after all we've been watching because there hasn't been a lot about Klingon culture or anything like that, and this is the first kind of glimpse we get of Klingons in the Next Generation. So it was kind of nice for me. I was like, oh, I'm not tired of it yet again after watching this next season, but I don't know. And there's no B plot in this episode, I noticed as well, which was kind of, maybe that's kind of part of it, making it kind of slower. But I don't know. So what was your overall impression of the episode?
This is probably going to end up middle ground for me. I didn't hate it. I just felt like there was no real B plot.
Right.
It was kind of just missing. So there was that issue, and that didn't drive the episode away. The episode typically would move. But I couldn't connect with the logic of like Worf would go back. Someone would think that Worf would go back on 20 years or 30 years of being raised by humans and their love just because this guy was like, you like to hunt when you were a child. Like,
Fair.
I just can't. I couldn't get there, and apparently neither could Worf. I think that's the important thing.
I think they didn't justify enough for him to have that much conflict where he was like, is he going to betray Starfleet for this? Like, yeah. But I think I did like Vaughn Armstrong as the actor who played Captain Chorus. I thought did a really good job. And that's why that scene I think worked for me, is because it normally could have been really over the top. I thought he did a pretty good job. But it didn't work for you, and that's fine. But that actor apparently is going to be 11 other Star Trek roles in years to come for us in episodes we're going to watch, which is crazy. So he plays tons of roles. So even though he dies in this episode, we're going to see that actor a bunch more times and a lot of weird forehead makeup probably over the years. But yeah, it's kind of like a good solid middle for me, but I think a less solid for you.
Less solid. Yeah.
That's fair.
Like a loose poop of episode.
You still pooped, but it was a loose poop.
It was loose. It wasn't water, but it was.
Oh, Jesus. All right, some trivia for this episode. Michael Dorn was pleased with the outcome of this episode, as he felt it showed the producers that the fans were just as interested in his character as the others in the main cast. He felt that it could have been taken further, and he wanted to be an epic battle at the end of the episode, which he didn't get, really. A little bit of a battle. While in the engine room, Captain Chorus says the following: I would rather die here than let the traitors of Kling pick the meat from my bones. The writer of that line intended for Kling to be the name of the Klingon homeworld, but it was later officially changed to Kronos, spelled with a Q, Q-O-N-O-S, in Star Trek 6, The Undiscovered Country in 1991 when that came out. Since it was decided that Kling sounded a bit odd, which I agree, it's not really that exciting. And
that would have only been, like 2 years after this episode came out then?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
So they hadn't really established what the name of the homeworld was going to be. So later on, they kind of made it canon that Kling was actually the name of like the capital, the first city in Kronos, but it's not really referenced any other episode. So that's the first and last time we'll hear the word Kling representing that. The Klingon battle cruiser is stock footage from Star Trek The Motion Picture from 1979, which is pretty cool. They overlaid that. Because of production delays, the Klingon language portions of the script where they are talking in Klingon didn't make any actual sense in translation. They were simply Klingon sounding words that were created by the writer because they didn't have time to go get the actual translations. Because I think it was Scotty, Mike Doohan, who actually kind of made the whole Klingon language from the start. There's like a whole language for it. Aside from Worf, this is the first episode of this series to feature flesh and blood Klingons. There was a Klingon female in the episode Hidden Q, but she was basically an illusion created by Q.
Yeah, I remember that one.
Yep. And if you look at the decking on the Tellurian freighter, our fans of Babylon 5 out there might recognize it because it was used as the wall panels on Babylon 5 station in that whole show. There's reused props. So we know that our friends have a Babylon 5 podcast, so we might recognize that. So, Steve, what are our Trek Connection, Muppet Connections this time around?
Oh, boy, do we got some. Commander Chorus, played by Vaughn Armstrong, who you mentioned, did a one-episode cameo in Wonder Woman, which the main star was Linda Carter, who was a Muppet Show guest.
That's right.
Charles Hyman, unfortunate last name, played Lieutenant Conmel, had a small cameo in the 1986 sitcom Sidekicks, where a cop tutors a boy who becomes his sidekick. The boy was played by Ernie Reyes Jr., a young martial artist who went on to be one of the Ninja Turtles in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 1, the guys in the costume doing the moves. And he then went on in Ninja Turtles 2 to play Keno, the delivery boy.
Oh, yeah.
And all of the main puppets and costumes and animatronics in those movies were provided by the Jim Henson Creature Shop.
That's damn right.
So Ernie Reyes Jr. probably met Jim and hung out with him. And
that's pretty cool.
Also in Sidekicks, this is unrelated, was Key Luke, who played the grandfather in Gremlins. So just yet another connection to something I love.
And were the Gremlins Henson? That was not Henson.
No, that was not Henson.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
David Froman, who played Commander Canera, was on an episode of TJ Hooker, which starred William Shatner.
Uh-huh.
He was also on an episode of Matlock, which had Don Knotts in it, who was also a Muppet Show guest.
Hey, there you go.
He was also in Diagnosis Murder with Dick Van Dyke, who was the co-host of a 1979 TV special, The Muppets Go Hollywood, in celebration of the release of the Muppet movie.
Well, look at that.
Bam, 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 bam.
It would make sense, though, because these episodes were so similar. They had so many similarities, didn't they, Steve?
They did. Both feature characters disguising their true nature. The spies pretending to be cute and cuddly animals in the Muppet Show, and the Klingon evacuees pretending to be victims of a Ferengi attack.
Ooh. Both have a warrior on a hospital table. There's a Klingon on the Enterprise, and then the Viking pig on the Muppet Show in Veterinarian's Hospital.
In a similar vein, both feature the glorification of battle and taking what's yours. The Vikings in the Navy number and Klingons reflecting on their old ways.
Klingons basically are space Vikings. That's true.
They are.
Both have battles with laser guns. The Klingons fighting the Enterprise crew, and the Roger Moore fighting off the spies in the closing number.
Very similar. I said both feature guards or jailers being overtaken. The yellow shirts getting shot to death. And the bear on patrol and Captain Link getting chained together and then robbed.
That's very true. That's very true. Oh, God. What's that noise?
Transporter malfunction.
I'm always so surprised by that.
Every time.
All right. So, as part of the show, we transport one character from one episode to the other and vice versa. So, what you got for us, Steve?
Trek to Muppets this week, I'm going to bring over the Klingons and replace the Vikings because I think it would be hilarious to see a dozen Klingons in full Klingon garb singing and dancing and pillaging their way into our hearts.
While singing in the Navy.
In the Navy.
Trek to Muppets, I'm having Captain Chorus come over to take the place of Roger Moore, thank God, because he'd have a lot more passion and charisma to host the episode, and he'd even perform some Klingon opera, so that'd be great.
Muppets to Trek, I'm going to bring over Captain Link and Fozzie Bear from Bear on Patrol and replace the inept Starfleet guards because it would at least make sense that they're terrible at what they do.
That's very true. Muppets to Star Trek, I'm going to have Rolf as Dr. Bob come over to take the place of Dr. Crusher. It would just be him making jokes over the dying Klingon. The other two Klingons become enraged and challenge him to mortal combat.
And they hold his eyes open and scream.
Rolf! So that brings us to the end of this episode of the MuppeTrek Podcast, and more importantly, the final episode of The Muppet Show.
It has been quite a journey, but we're not done yet. We are picking up at the next production from the mind of Jim Henson, Fraggle Rock.
Woo!
So join us next time for the very first episode of Fraggle Rock, Beginnings.
And Next Generation episode, The Arsenal of Freedom.
So from the lovers, the dreamers, and us.
Live long and prosper, everyone. Thanks for listening to the MuppeTrek Podcast. Be sure to follow us on social media on Facebook and Twitter.
Subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, or your favorite podcast platform.
This podcast has been brought to you by A Play on Nerds.